All right. Should be starting. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Semantic Kernel public community office hours. I always want to make sure to say public because it's a public forum. So, if you're going to say something or raise your hand or anything, make sure that you do so knowing that you are speaking to the general public. So don't disclose any, specific company information. But yes, so we have several questions that we can go through. But as always, right, we encourage you all to ask questions live, raise your hand to add questions into the chat. We will definitely get to them. And one thing that I would love for your help or feedback on, I'll paste this in the chat, is we are looking to get some feedback in terms of how we can get better, how we can do more things to engage with you, the community, and to make appropriate investments and all that. One thing that I will at least say is that one thing that we saw by the initial responses to this survey is that we actually have a good population of people coming from the Europe area. And we know that at this time in particular, this time being 2:30 p.m. Pacific, it's not the best time for our friends over in Europe. So with that, right, we will look to maybe soon launch another office hour that is more focused for that time zone. So if you all are from Europe already and you're on the call, thank you so much for obliging, staying up late to chat with us. So, but yes, for anyone listening to this recording later, leave a comment or just mention on Discord, what sort of things you'd like to see, what times you'd like to see future office hours, and we will do our best to make that happen. Okay, so in terms of announcements, some new things that have come on recently is we have some new blog posts that are out. There will also be some new videos that are coming out soon. We have AI tooling for Java, which is a guest contribution from Shoham. And he's a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and he's very passionate about Java. So definitely check out this blog post if you are in the Java world and want to play with Semantic Kernel. And stay tuned for a video with myself and Shoham. If you all haven't seen, there's also this another. It's a link to a external blog post, but Kifney Lowe from I forget exactly which team, but he wrote a blog post on Microsoft Fabric and Semantic Kernel, which actually is a really interesting one because Fabric is one of those. It was a new announcement at Build or rebranding, but basically it's the data lake, data warehouse that is the first party solution for Microsoft. So if you have all your data in Azure and all that, right, and you want to be able to seamlessly interact with it using the semantic kernel, well, this is a good good thing to at least keep an eye on, right? This sort of integration. So I'm also going to be releasing a video later with the author of this to talk more about it. We've talked about this before, about new planners. So Stepwise Planner has been around actually for some time now, but we actually now have a blog post specifically on it. So definitely check that out. One thing that I did do from engaging with the community, I posted it on Discord, is I talked with the author of the sequential and stepwise planner PRs from the Python side of the semantic kernel. His name is Juwon Kim, and from Korea, and he has been a strong contributor from Python and has brought stepwise planner, sequential planner, and all that to that language. But this blog post is specifically on just the concept of stepwise planner and how you can use it for your applications. So definitely check that out. And do know that, right, if you make contributions to Semantic Kernel, we would love to feature you in some in some way, call you out, give you a shout out in the community. So keep them coming is what I'll say. One last thing to call out is this just came today. We have a guest post from Zane. Zane is actually from the Weaviate team. Weaviate is one of the third-party open source vector databases that you all can use as part of your memory storage needs, vector search and all that with Semantic Kernel. So yeah, this guest post from Zane shows off how to do that. So I'm also going to be talking with Zane in a bit. So if you want to watch that video, you can check that out. So yes, so these are all our most recent blog posts. But in terms of what's latest in the code, right? If you're a Java house, make sure to pull the latest from Maven, right? Java 0.2.8. Python is at 0.3.8 for the pip package. .NET, I don't think has released the newest one or latest one, so this is the latest. So, but there's a lot of stuff in there. So if you haven't already gotten the latest NuGet package, definitely do so. So, and if you want to make sure to stay on top of like what are breaking changes, right? We will find ways to better communicate that, potentially even in forums like this. But the GitHub will also include notes like breaking changes in each release. We'll try our best to do that. So at least that's one data point you can have for what's going on. Okay, so with that, and actually we have a hand up from Sven. So go ahead.
Yeah. I've got a question regarding breaking changes. Are those usually changes that will stop my code from compiling, or will they just change something that happens somewhere in the background that makes my software not work anymore? Because the first case would be easy because I update the NuGet, compiler says, it doesn't work anymore. The second case would be kind of bad, I think.
Good question.
Which language specifically are you thinking about?
C#.
Okay. Yeah, I think this would be true across all languages. So most of the time it would be a compile break. However, we do have some semantic functions or prompts that are in the code or as text files in the code that occasionally change. And one of these that's top of mind for me is with Stepwise Planner. There's some work going to optimize the number of LLM calls that it makes. And there's a bug that someone opened related to that. So there may be some things that change the actual functionality that don't break your build. And this is tough. Like, you don't want to have a package come down, then all of a sudden you ship it, and then there's a huge mess that's left behind. So it's important to have some sort of test in there. And we're in non-deterministic world here where you can't always test things easily. But if you have any existing pipelines, say a continuous integration pipeline, having a way that you can run an integration test on any new changes that come in that you don't have to manually go through is critical. Even just in standard software engineering practice, even more so when you have non-deterministic outcomes. So it is possible to have both. I think we try to call out when things change that aren't compile changes. Most of these ones you see here are actually, as we look at the comments, they've removed the read-only skill collection accessor. So like that would be a breaking change to the compiler, but it could be both. So it's a good thing to call out. And, Alex, we should probably try and be extra vigilant to changes that have come in that are changing the prompts that don't alter the compile.
Yeah, that's a good point. If people have ideas from the community of how to best communicate that, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll try something. But yes, I agree. That's a big thing to call out, especially in this world of AI programming that we're in right now. Okay, sounds good. So we have some questions we can go over. And actually, the first one comes from Sven. So So he asks a question regarding memory. So he says, I need some sort of pre-filtering for my embedded documents that is more sophisticated than only having different indices. Our customer has multiple products in multiple product categories and also multiple versions of the same product over the past time. I need to specify some sort of combination of those categories before searching. Otherwise, I might end up with, say, 10 top results, but they are all for another product, so filtering after search does not work. So I'm guessing, and Sven, you can clarify, right, the scenario, but I'm guessing the question is, how do you do this with
exactly
with this type of search scenario?
I looked it up, and a colleague sent me that link from one of the ChatGPT plugins. They have some sort of logic in place where they kind of pass some query parameters to the Redis for the search, but I'm not really good with reading Python code, so I'm just guessing from what I read. And I'd love to have that as maybe an optional parameter for that search thing, for the memory part, because as the question already states, when you have like the 10 top results, but all the 10 top results are not for your specific like category of things you want to search for, you kind of get lost.
Can you give us a tiny bit more detail? So I understand it's your scenario here is products.
Let me try to give you an example. Say we do have many documents about cars that we have embedded in the Redis, and the user has a question regarding a car. Maybe, how do I open the trunk? And from my software, I know the context in which the user is. Say I know the model he is asking the question about. But I'm not able to set up a vector database index for each of the possible model, year, series combinations, because that will end up being like 200 different indexes. So I'd like to provide the information, filtering all the possible results down to only the documents that really affect my context, my, in this case, car, because this is something I know before. And then the issue with that is when he has a question, and maybe I do have 100 documents that all answer the question, I will probably not have the document that tackles my specific car in the top 10 results.
Yep, makes perfect sense. We had a similar scenario a few months ago where we were trying to work out, it was like a time to live. So certain, and we weren't using Redis, so it was in an older vector database implementation, but we had things that were out of date and we wanted to prevent those from showing up in the index. Okay. There's a few different ways to think about this. The Azure Cognitive Search implementation lets you do vector plus, it's not faceting, it's filtering, I think. So you can do some sort of union between those two things. I actually don't know if we support that in the memory implementation that we have in the repository, and has changed, and I haven't looked at the current one. And I'm not sure if Davis is on the call today. It sounds like you're using Redis though, so that may not help you.
Yes.
Can we, if we don't already have an issue, could you open an issue on GitHub and open this as a bug or a feature request, whatever you feel like, and then let us go and see if we can work out the right way to do this, because it would be nice to have this across all of the vector database implementations that we have, where possible.
Yes, that's exactly, that is what I thought. Maybe it's not in there because of the many vector databases we have, and not all of them may support this. But I thought maybe those they do not support that as an initial filtering can apply the filters after searching or something. Maybe I don't know what the best solution is for that, but I will open up an issue for that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so we actually have a internal, forum where this type of question has come up also at Microsoft, and Devis in particular has said that this scenario is about like hybrid search, right? Hybrid search plus vector search, and this combination of, and Chris kind of highlighted that, yeah, if you want to add some attributes or tags or metadata, right, you can do this. But often like that filtering happens on the client side, right? You've already done this like vector search, embedding cosine similarity sort of thing. And then after you do the sort of like metadata filtering. But I will say that Azure Cognitive Search has, like I saw this tech talk, and I'm going to be talking with the lead PM for this soon, recording it and sharing it out with you all. But like vector search or hybrid search is one of the differentiators, right? It's a reason why you may want to use something like Azure Cognitive Search as opposed to the, open source other ones that may not have this feature today. So, but one thing I'll call out, and this is something that Devis would call out also, is we have this kind of internal effort going on. We haven't really publicized it as much because it's not ready for prime time yet, but this repo, GitHub, Microsoft Semantic Memory, is going to be a place for us to explore more of these advanced memory scenarios. And and it already has some stuff here that you can check out. So I'll link it in the chat. But basically, if you remember, our main emphases for this, for our roadmap is, what is it? Plugins, planners, and personas. So we've talked a lot about the first two, right? Plugins and planners, but personas has not received as much attention yet, but that's because it will feature a lot of these advanced memory concepts, and you'll start to see, think of it like if you're building beyond just a planner, but like an agent, right? You want that agent to have more advanced memory. So it will use the contents of this repo. So definitely start it, take a look, and give feedback. But yes, all this to say is that today, right now, if Semantic Kernel doesn't directly support hybrid search, right, it's a feature inside Azure Cognitive Search that we just need to eventually bring in. But yeah, I'll definitely, encourage you to check this out and stay tuned for this. But as Craig mentioned, also if you need to get unblocked today, right? No guarantees that we can necessarily implement this for the third party vector DBs and all that, but it's at least good for us to have on our radar that this is like what you all care about. So please file that issue.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Very good question. All right.
Thank you for the response. I think also the link for the other repository seems very useful.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this next question from Michael. Michael asks, is anyone using guidance with Semantic Kernel? Would it be an anti-pattern to use SK with guidance? So for those who don't know, guidance is a repo that came from actually researchers from Microsoft Research. I don't think they anticipated it to get, this amount of traction and visibility and all that, but it has, and it's really cool, really great. It is, some people who described it, I think Craig described this to me as prompt templating on steroids. So it is like very advanced type of prompt templating. You could do a lot more things. And the short answer with like how does this interact with Semantic Kernel is we are currently in the process or in dialogue with the team, with the guidance team, to figure out what is the good integration with it. Maybe we will adopt parts of, if not the entire prompt templating schema that they have, and have that be an option for you, right? If you want to use that for your semantic kernel development. or we could also, I don't know, offer some other type of integration. So, but yeah, so that is our current relationship with guidance. We actually like it a lot. There's a lot of great ideas in it. But in terms of like, is it an anti-pattern? If you found a way to mix the two, I'd be very curious to see. So Michael or whoever, just ping us, let us know how you did it. Is it an anti-pattern? I mean, not necessarily. There will be overlapping things. So this is where you have to reconcile. How are you gonna, do one thing over the other? But yeah, it's a good framework, and we'd encourage you to at least take a look. All right. Next question we have from Viper. Has there been any updates or plans to enabling plugins for SQL/Azure SQL? Also, is there a roadmap view on SK for enabling integrations with Microsoft's first-party products? I think.
Yeah, I saw Chris on the call. Chris, have you done some of the work on this one? If you're still there.
And yes, so this is also our strategy here is also aligned with the semantic memory initiative, where so yes, that's absolutely on our radar. We did publish a demo sample kind of exploring this space in terms of just the query generation, which is really just one aspect of kind of the whole ecosystem you need to do something useful with that data. And the query generation is kind of the entry point. But in terms of being able to harvest structured data and utilize it as part of semantic pipeline is part. Yeah, that's the sample. Thank you. That's part of the long-term strategy for that is part of the repo that Alex shared earlier.
So the second part of this question is there a roadmap view on SK for enabling integrations with Microsoft first-party products? So there is a lot that people have asked us for, right? Microsoft has things like Teams or like Bot Builder, right? Bot Builder Framework or Teams AI, like all these different names of similar type products, at least in my mind. But there's also things like Power Desktop, Power Automate, Power Apps, and SQL Server, all these different things that. So okay, my answer to this is there a roadmap view? We are working with direct teams to work on a common plugin architecture, right? Going back to this plugins piece for how developers, how people can integrate, with these different products. A lot of that boils down to like landing on the appropriate schema of that, like the manifest and all that, to make sure that we can appropriately create this type of plugin. We know that there's a lot of community contributions for hooking up with different products out there, and so that's another story where, and I think we cover this later in a different question, but it's like we want to encourage that type of behavior, right? We want people in the community to continue to create plugins, to hook it up to their favorite, apps, services, etc., products. Maybe those can be Microsoft products. But there is a larger story, a larger motion happening, I guess, from the Microsoft side, so that yes, it is a what do you want to call it? More seamless integration between all the products with Semantic Kernel as like the orchestrator to build this. So yeah, sorry, that's like a high level, maybe vague description of a roadmap, but Always if you want to have very particular connectors or specific things, hooking semantic kernel to something, let us know, share it with the community, share it on Discord, and we can, we can see, what things to prioritize. I don't know if Craig or Chris or anyone else has anything more they want to add to that.
No, I think that was good. And just keep in mind the open API spec exists, and it's very easy to decorate APIs with that specification. And Microsoft also has a very strong first-party connector story, which is what Alex was referring to earlier around the Power Platform and other bits and pieces. So yeah, stay tuned. Microsoft's a big ship. There's a lot of things going on, and we are trying to corral everyone into a single good direction. Good question, though.
All right, we have a question from Discord. Ashish Web BT. What is the possibility of getting the whole prompt in the plugin from Copilot? I want to create a single plugin where all internal plugins will be registered. This plugin will act as a gateway and call internal plugins based on the user prompt. Is this possible?
Yes, it is possible. So having the single plugin that then can call n number of plugins is absolutely possible. I did this recently with a very simple research agent that I was building. So I have a plugin for web search. I have a plugin for web scraping. So you can search, find a bunch of links. You can then take each of those links and scrape the entire contents of the page. Those are two separate plugins. And my research agent, I also built as a plugin. So my research agent plugin, I can ping from somewhere. It could be Chat Copilot, which is maybe what we're talking about here, maybe not. But I could import the custom plugin into Chat Copilot. I can make a request. It will find my research plugin, which will then in turn call the web search and web scraper plugins using the Stepwise Planner. So yes, absolutely possible. It's also an interesting pattern. I first did a console app for my research agent, and my console app still had separate plugins for web search and web scraping. And then I thought, okay, well, let's just try making the research agent itself a plugin. And end of the day, it's just code hosted behind an endpoint is typically what we're talking about when we have a plugin approach right now. And so any code that you have that can be wrapped again using the open API declaration, we'll call it, along with the chat, with or without the ChatGPT AI plugin JSON, can be imported into Semantic Kernel. So yes, all of this is possible.
Are there any sort of gotchas, Craig, in terms of what people should be careful of, or?
Yeah, the only thing that you'll start to get into is when you have all of these plugins hosted as separate endpoints, there's latency introduced, there's another point of failure, there might be a network interruption or something that occurs during the request. And so you have to start thinking about fault tolerance, resiliency, all these sorts of things if you have a distributed architecture. And this is not something, again, that's new. I think the place I've gotten to in my mind with all of this large language model stuff is, as an app developer, you're using the exact same patterns that you've had for years, distributed systems, whether it's microservices or whatever word you use for it before microservices, or whatever the current word is that I'm not sure of, then you're largely doing the same thing. If you have plugins which each have a separation of concerns and responsibility, like my example earlier, one of them does search, one of them scrapes pages, one of them's the brain that does the research, then you have a really good distribution of responsibility, and you could have separate teams. If you're a larger organization working on these things, or as an individual, you can have, this thing has one responsibility, it's to search the web. I know that's all it's supposed to do. I test it for that scenario. I make sure that it's stood up in an appropriate way, and off you go. But you do have, you have that thing that you may not have had previously, where all your code was in the monolith, right, in the one place, where you then have separate endpoints to maintain.
Very good. Sounds like old things have become new again. And the new things aren't really that new. So cool. I see David asks in the chat.
Yeah, just kind of clarifying what you said, Craig. Is that an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so those ones are, so it's confusing because we changed terminology and we've changed a little bit of the distribution of where we're putting the skill. So the chat skill, yes, it does have a document memory skill. It has a semantic chat memory skill. I can't remember if they're semantic or native. Those ones are directly referenced and included in the library. Whereas what I was talking about was, imagine you pull them out. So you pull out document memory skill, you host it on an endpoint somewhere, and you do the same with semantic chat memory skill, and then you have your chat skill on a third endpoint, and it calls document memory skill and chat memory skill as needed. The separation of concerns is the same thing that I was talking about. So each skill has its own, sub area of concerns, which is isolated in this case into different classes. And when we start to talk about plugins and distribution of plugins with endpoints, then we're going a step further and saying there's a totally separate environment or runtime or endpoint.
Yeah, physical separation. You can scale it differently and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Got it.
Correct.
Thanks.
Awesome. Good discussion. Cool. All right. We have another question that's from Discord, actually. And I did respond to this, but it's worth calling out here because I think a lot of people have this type of question. So Kevin asks, hello, some of us have developed plugins or recipes for SK. As they are currently not part of the main source code, we have released the corresponding packages under our own name and organization. In my opinion, this can pose problems for the adoption of a new open source framework if there isn't a real community around it. Providing some elements of the framework outside it, the central repository may be a good idea, but it may also be preferable to reduce the places where outsiders can find the packages they need. I think that if there's no counter opinion to this, I'd like to create a GitHub org whose name is yet to be identified, like SK Foundations, also open source, on which we could deposit packages related to this wonderful framework. What do you think? Okay, so I'll reiterate the question because I've heard it, or many people have asked this, where it's like, hey, this is great. We're centralizing on plugins, right? I'm building plugins. I see other people building plugins. Where can I find where all these plugins live? Where can I post my plugins so that other people can find it or I can share it more easily? And our answer to this is we are figuring this out exactly. Like we are playing with different ideas around like, okay, maybe because at the end of the day, right, we want you all to own your plugins. We want it to be, stuff that you maintain, right, that you keep up to date, that you and that you get recognized for it and all that. And for us, right, we can curate or collect them and maybe just put it in a repo with just links to all those places. But I think there's also this other side where people are looking to Microsoft and saying like, hey, I want the Microsoft blessed plugins, or I want the first party supported ones, especially if I'm going to be interacting with Microsoft products and services and all that. So that's another effort where, yeah, we're the org is again trying to figure out how to, create this sort of, you can call it a marketplace, you can call it a discovery service thing where, yeah, all these plugins exist somewhere, right? And you can easily find them and bring them into your own projects. And where does that fit in with third party, with, because plugins are such a universal, architecture, right? Anyone can create anything really and express it as a plugin. So we do have to be mindful, careful of, we can't just like dump all plugins that exist and call it a day, right? We have to do this in some thoughtful way. So I know there are some like community efforts, even like Semantic Kernel. Some people have been creating like awesome Semantic Kernel projects like GitHub, where they feature all these different cool projects. A lot of Craig's projects, for example, are there. But and you know, I think that would be cool, a nice thing to continue like promoting or encouraging. But at least from our side, right? Yeah, this is a topic that we are figuring out what to do with, and once we have something, we will definitely share it out and let the community know. But yes, there's a really good question, Kevin, and if you all have ideas, you know, for how to best do this, you know, we would love to hear them. So I don't know if anyone else has any follow-up or commentary they want to add to this.
I'll just add one thing, Alex. It's not semantic kernel specific, but there was this GitHub repository that I don't know who created that points to a bunch of the well-known AI plugin JSON files. And this was specifically designed to say, hey, you know, here's a bunch of plugins that work with ChatGPT. And so there's some lightweight, very simple things that people have done. Go into the plugins folder at the top, and you'll see there's a bunch of links to, it's not that extensive, but there's probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 of them. Yeah, a bunch of different things, Klarna, you know, whatever else that people have decided to put in here, and it just gives you the AI plugin.json. So if you wanted to, you could go and grab them, and you can. All of these should work with Semantic Kernel. Should be able to pull them in, reference them, and it should load the plugin and give you the ability to do whatever that plugin does.
Yeah, I like this. But I'm guessing this is not the only repo that has or does something like this. Cool. Yeah. I mean, however this gets implemented, I think the need and the desire for this is clear. So yes, Semantic Kernel team will figure out something that we can at least offer for this. So stay tuned. Okay, we have one more question, and then I think we can. I think we actually have a demo from the community that we can look at. But this question from Dinesh Kumars: can a skill be another kernel? I am thinking of an architecture where there is a coordinating copilot with other assisted copilots with skills that they have to execute. Is it possible to achieve this with SK?
Yes. Yeah, and this is almost the same question, or I will give almost the same answer that I gave to the question 3 questions ago, or whatever it was. Yeah, you can have, so the kernel is lightweight. It's in most of the samples that we ship, there's a new instance of the kernel created to respond to a web request that comes in from some sort of client, whether it's a web browser or whatever. And so kernel's lightweight. Each of the plugins that I talked about earlier in my scenario, the researcher, the web search, and the web scraper. Actually, web search does not have a kernel instance there, but the researcher has a kernel instance and the web scraper has a kernel instance. In the scraper, I have the ability for the caller to ask for a summary. So instead of the entire contents of the page, you can ask for a summary. I have an instance of the semantic kernel there that when Stepwise Planner decides to ask for the summary, it does the summarization. You can have a very, you can do exactly what you're asking to do here, yes. So each of your plugins could have their own instance of the semantic kernel. It can be totally, or it is totally independent of the instance that you may have in your caller. It may have shared access to a vector database. You might say, okay, I have 5 plugins. I want them all to see the same vector database. You could configure each instance of the kernel to the same vector database. You could do it differently. You don't have to use vector databases. You could have each of them point to a different model. You could have one instance of the kernel for GPT-4, one of them for 3.5, one of them could go to Llama 2 or some other Hugging Face model that works for your scenario. So the answer is yes, you can do this. And this is, I think, a good way of, again, distilling the problem down to small, independent operations. So you have loosely, you have plugins, each which has its own responsibility for doing something. And this is I think, a sensible architecture.
Yeah, I agree. I think like especially for scenarios where you don't always need to use GPT-4, right? You don't always need to bring a tank to a fight. You can bring a very sensible, tool to it. So a cheaper model could be, very much used. And to do that, yeah, you can just have different instances of the kernel whose job it is to focus on, one specific thing. So yes, I think it's not only possible, it could be also encouraged of an architecture to look at. All right, great question. And I will stop sharing because we have a demo from, I always forget your name. I see jsboige, but I don't know how to, can you share your name?
Call me Jess. This is fine. Hi,
Jess.
everybody.
Hey.
And well, this is actually going to be about the last topic we were discussing, because I'm going to demo a new connector, which is kind of a router for LLMs. So it is actually about routing the actual skills, because this is what it does to the LLMs that have been vetted by a primary connector, basically ChatGPT, for being capable of handling the skill. So should I share my screen?
Yes, hopefully you're able to.
Okay. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the whole thing is for now a pull request that I made 2 weeks ago. That is called .NET feature multi-connector. I sent a message in the chat with the link. And here what it looks like in Visual Studio. So it's a new C# project just underneath a Hugging Face, which is called multi-connector. And it's got 2 inner folders, analysis and prompt settings, and otherwise a couple of main classes. The completion, the one that implements the completion interface, and mainly settings, a lot of settings to configure how to do the prompt matching, the routing, the testing, the vetting, etc., etc., etc. And there's a whole set of classes dealing with the analysis. You need to collect samples, and then you need to test all connectors on your samples, and then you need to evaluate the tests with your primary connector, and then you need to make a decision whether the connector is up for the task or not. And then a lot of things related with prompts, because basically we are outside of the main kernel. When you get to the connector, when you hit the connector, you've just basically got a prompt that's been already processed. The template has been injected with the actual parameters, and you've got the request settings. So you need to figure out which skills were at the origin of those prompts, and you need to do some kind of prompt signature extraction to figure that out. And this is what this folder is about. And then you've got a lot of things in the unit tests. So the unit tests, which is the thing I started this pull request with, it was more like a proof of concept. I've got a series of mock completions based on a simple arithmetic engine. So the engine, it can do simple operation, add, subtract, multiply, divide, and it can generate a prompt for that, and it can parse a prompt for that, basically. And you've got a main engine, the primary one, that does all the operations. And then in the tests, you've got the secondary engines. Create completions. Okay, so the main one does all operations, and then the other ones do just one of those operations. So in the test, you first define the settings, and you create the completions, and then you create a multi-text completion with those settings and with the completions that have been created. And this is the one that will answer to a kernel or to a plan. And then you run it basically once. It's going to be run with the primary connector, and then a lot of samples are going to be collected by then, but the analysis task is blocked. It needs a trigger to be released, because I didn't want to mix up all the things. There's a lot of parallel things going on. You can define the parallel, the max parallel number of calls to many things, including to your connector. And actually, ChatGPT doesn't seem to have any limit for that, apart from the maximum tokens per minute. But you can easily do 10 or more parallel calls to ChatGPT, which is probably not going to be the case with your hosted smaller LLM. And when the results are done, basically we've got new settings that were computed and that were updated because the settings told so. And you just run the same thing again. And then, then you do the asserts. You check that the result is still correct. And then you check that according to costs, which are completely arbitrary, it now costs less because you're running on smaller LLMs, and it also you spend less time. Well, this probably depends on a lot of things like the environment, so it's a wide computation, but it works. But this was just a proof of concept, so maybe I should just run it actually. And so there are several cases. You can actually weight the performance gain and the cost gain. So this one is a simple one where the secondary costs less and is faster. So it should easily take over the other one. If I run the tests, okay. And then we've got a lot of instrumentation. I made sure we had a lot of that. So that was where I wanted to post it. So you see, well, it runs the various operation. We can see compute, add, add to, etc., etc. And it's the primary connector doing all the first stuff. And then after a while, we're going to see the secondaries being tested and then being evaluated. So vetted true, vetted false, etc., etc. And then the thing run again. And then the assets, I guess. Okay, so that was the second run, and then the assets. So but that was kind of a mock, and it took me much longer to get to a true integration test that actually does the real thing with complex functions. So, and this is going to be in the integration test. So there's a new integration test for multi-connector, which has a single class with a lot of theory data, because it's going to be about the complexity of the input text, which skills you want to test, which models you want to test. So this is a lot of combination, and this is where I will need people to get involved in it, because this is I just can't do all of this. And then you have texts, which I use ChatGPT to write. One about, well, the dances are about the story of dance. Simple one, medium and longer, and then a difficult text with difficult vocabulary. Same with the story of communication, simple, medium, hard. And then the idea of the main idea of the text is you're going to use one or several models. I'll come to this because this is using Uba Booga, which I need to introduce as well. But they're all Llama 2 models, basically. And so either one or multiple ones that you configure in your main settings. So this is my test settings.development. This is where I'm going to configure the various LLMs that I have. The main one is going to be ChatGPT. And then you've got a plan. So those are plans that were generated with the sequential planner. And I have 2 plans that I propose for now, but we should make a lot more. One that just tests the summarize skill. Well, it didn't need to be a plan because it's just a simple function, and one that does summarize on the input and then topics and then elements at index 2, I think. Yeah, that's it. And you've got another test that actually works, not all the time, but it is quite amazing when it works, is the one where I'll actually ask ChatGPT to come up with a plan to evaluate other LLMs to give them work. And it does come out with interesting tests that would ideally be saved in the plans to have reproducible data. But then you give it the text that is going to be the input to the plan, and then another text that is going to be the validation of the actual data. Because what you can come with is that the models are vetted, but they don't really work well. So this is a way, if it works on communication hard, maybe it's not going to work on dance hard. So we're testing on a different text to make sure that it works. And I'm pretty sure in the end, we're going to have to do probabilistic reasoning with all that and collect. For now, it's all being vetted or not, and the number of evaluations, it's a go, no go decision. But in the end, I guess we want to have more control on the way we compute that, and that will probably lead to mixture models as a result of the probabilistic reasoning on that. And then you give it skills. So with the planless tests, you just give it the skills and you ask it, well, do whatever you think with those skills to test smaller models. And with all that said, there's a main function that is also very instrumented, and that's the whole thing. We're starting with settings, a lot of them, more than in the other tests, but a lot of them are optional. I've put them there so that you have an idea of what you can do or not. Then initialization of the kernel with the skills. Load of the plan, either dynamic or static, with but even the static is injected with the text, and then you run it with the primary connector. So the whole flow of the test is similar to the proof of concept with arithmetic mocks. And then when the first one is finished, we compute intermediate results and we do the analysis task. And when the analysis task is finished, we do a second run where we reload the plan. And the second run should be with the optimized LLMs, either the primary one if the other ones were not vetted, or those which were vetted. And then we do the last pass, which is where we load the plan with different data. And we collect new samples from that last pass, and we check the samples for validity. And this is all in the assets. So again, we want to gain on costs, and the cost is hypothetical. I'm not sure what the real one would be. And then we want to make sure that the evaluation on the third run are validated, unless they were performed with the primary connector, because what happens is actually even ChatGPT does mistakes sometimes. So on some plans, it doesn't vet himself. So in that case, we don't fail the tests, but we still want to have at least one smaller LLM that was vetted on one semantic function. So I should just do a small execution of this one. Let's see. Small one would be communication simple. No, the model that I loaded. Oh yeah, I should talk about what we got. Let me just do the test first, and then I'll show you what the model is and how it works.
Alex, this feels like it should be a video or a blog post or something like more in depth and recorded. And so this is super interesting. I'm sorry we haven't looked at the PR that's been sitting there for 2 weeks. There's been quite a lot of things stacking up in there, so we need to get a little bit further on that one. I think we've just run out of time for this week.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I should.
No, you're okay. No, you're fine. And I see it's very late or it's early morning for you in your time zone. So thank you for staying up late and sharing this with us. This is something people have asked for, the routing ability from making the right decision on which model to use. And I think this is a very interesting way of solving the problem. So I don't know, Alex, if you want to talk more in depth another time and do something.
I think as Craig mentioned, this is a good candidate for a blog post, because you did all this great work, and as Craig mentioned, it's a question that a lot of people are figuring out, like, how do I do this? And if you would like, I think if you can capture all this great work that you've done in PR, write it in as much detail as you want, right? In terms of considerations and things that you've done, I think that'd be really good, and we could feature it on our
definitely. I'll do the documentation too, because for now I haven't updated the instructions for integration tests and everything. So I need to put a README in all the important folders that I just showed. But yeah, definitely, I'm up for doing other presentations of that. I don't think I will be able to put so much effort in the follow-up. So I really hope that people can get hold of what all I've done, because now it's all about testing your models and testing your semantic function. What I realized that it is actually a good test to figure out if your prompt is good or not. If you have two prompts for the same semantic task, the smallest model that is capable of understanding your prompt might make this.
For sure. Awesome. Well, again, great work. And thank you everyone for joining this week's office hours. And yes, please join us next time, where we can share off some more amazing things from the community. All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.